There are moments that fracture a life, not with a clean break, but with a spiderweb of cracks that spread until the entire structure of your reality collapses. For Denise Holloway, that moment wasn't a gunshot or a siren. It was a sound she'd heard 1,000 times before. The soft ping of a computer notification. A sound that, on this night, would serve as a key, unlocking a secret so monstrous it would unmake the woman she thought she was and forge her into something else. Something the law calls a criminal, but a mother's heart might call a savior. What happens when the evil you're trying to protect your child from is already inside the house? When the monster isn't at the door, but sleeping in your bed? This is the story of a predator who hid in plain sight, a daughter who suffered in silence, and a mother who was pushed past the breaking point and into the chilling territory of vengeance. Welcome to Fatal Affairs. If you believe that the most complex stories deserve to be told, help us by subscribing and enabling notifications. Your support is what makes this channel possible. Denise Marie Holloway was forged in the industrial heart of East Cleveland. Born in 1974, she was one of 4 children in a family where survival was the primary ambition. Her father was a Ford plant maintenance man, his days measured in grease and grime. Her mother scrubbed the floors of spacious homes in neighborhoods Denise could only glimpse from a car window. From an early age, Denise learned a fundamental lesson. Life was a battle for inches, and stability was a luxury. She vowed her life would be different. With a grit inherited from her parents, she became the first in her family to earn a high school diploma. Her mother's tears of pride a greater reward than the certificate itself. Community college followed, with aspirations of a career in the medical field, a world of clean scrubs and steady paychecks, a world away from the constant financial anxiety that had shadowed her childhood. At 22, she married Devin Bradley, her high school sweetheart. He was a man full of charm and grand promises. For 2 years, Denise allowed herself to believe she had found her partner in building the stable life she craved. When she became pregnant in 1998, the dream felt complete. Devin was an enthusiastic father-to-be, his excitement a vibrant splash of color in their world. But that color drained away in February 1999. The birth of their daughter, Grace, came with a diagnosis that would irrevocably alter the course of Denise's life: cerebral palsy. The doctors explained that Grace would face a lifetime of physical challenges and would depend entirely on others for her care. Devin's enthusiasm curdled into resentment, then indifference. The man who had painted the nursery and picked out names couldn't handle a reality that didn't match his dream. By the time Grace was 2, he was gone, leaving only a note on the kitchen counter that read, "I didn't sign up for this." From that day forward, Denise's world shrank to the size of her daughter. She became Grace's body, her advocate, her shield. She juggled jobs, mastered physical therapy routines, and fought endless battles with insurance companies and school systems. Grace, though trapped in a rebellious body, was a beacon of light. Her mind was sharp, her laughter was infectious, and her love for her mother was absolute. Every decision Denise made was filtered through the single, sacred question: what does Grace need? By 2010, exhausted and lonely, Denise relocated to Columbus. It was at a church potluck that she met Harold Eugene Carter. He was 39, divorced, and worked in IT. He was quiet, unassuming, and utterly unremarkable. And to a woman weary of volatility and abandonment, his quiet presence felt like a safe harbor. Harold's past was a carefully curated story. He spoke of a rural Pennsylvania upbringing and an honorable discharge from the Army. What he omitted were the darker footnotes. His ex-wife had once filed a restraining order against him, only to mysteriously withdraw it later, the details sealed by the court. Psychologically, men like Harold often cultivate a savior persona. They seek out situations where they can appear indispensable, gaining control through feigned helpfulness. He didn't pursue Denise with passion. He pursued her with a chilling patience, observing her life to find the exact role he needed to play to gain access. His interest was never in Denise. It was in her vulnerability, and by extension, her completely dependent daughter. He never flinched at Grace's disability. Where other men saw a burden, Harold appeared to see only a child. "He doesn't run," Denise told her sister Janet. He just stays. For a woman who had shouldered the world alone for a decade, those 3 words sounded like a prayer answered. She had no idea she was welcoming a predator who saw her daughter not as a child to be loved, but as a target to be acquired. They married in 2012. Harold quickly took over the family's finances and many of Grace's caregiving duties. To the outside world, he was a model husband and stepfather. The constant financial pressure on Denise finally eased. The crushing weight of solo caregiving was finally shared. But this wasn't partnership. It was a strategy of methodical isolation. In 2014, he caringly suggested Denise quit her second job. He began taking over Grace's nightly baths, insisting Denise was too tired. These acts, disguised as kindness, were tactical moves designed to seize control and eliminate oversight. Then came the subtle signs, the fragments of a truth too horrifying to comprehend. Grace, whose speech was limited and difficult, would sometimes manage to say, "Daddy, don't like." Denise, exhausted and trusting, would interpret it as a childish complaint about food or bedtime. She couldn't conceive that her daughter was giving her a direct, desperate warning. The breadcrumbs were there, but Denise was too deep inside the forest to see they formed a path leading to a monster's den. It is vital to understand that Grace Holloway was not intellectually disabled. Cerebral palsy had caged her body, but her mind was a lucid, intelligent observer, fully aware of the world around her. She understood everything. She felt everything. She simply could not voice the horrors being inflicted upon her. Her primary tools were a simple communication tablet and a handful of words she could say clearly: "Mom, water, hurt, and stop." The prosecution would later piece together her desperate, failed attempts to sound the alarm, an agitated outburst during a physical therapy session when a male therapist touched her legs, a pattern of withdrawal and listlessness reported by a home health aide after weekends spent alone with Harold, nightmares that ripped through the house, filled with unintelligible sounds of pure terror. Harold's psychological manipulation was as cruel as his physical abuse. He twisted her disability into a weapon against her, telling her that no one would believe her broken words, that if she told, her mother would be taken away, and she would be sent to an institution. She couldn't run, she couldn't fight, and when she tried to speak, no one understood the language of her trauma. In the winter of 2017, Grace's body began to change, a strange weight gain, concentrated in her abdomen. Denise attributed it to holiday meals. Harold calmly agreed, suggesting a change in diet. Pregnancy was a thought so far outside the realm of possibility, it was science fiction. Grace was never unsupervised. The only people with unfettered access were Denise and the man she trusted with her life, her husband. Grace's behavior became more alarming. She, who had always been affectionate, began to flinch at her mother's touch. One afternoon, in an act of profound desperation, Grace took her mother's hand and pressed it firmly against her swollen stomach, her eyes pleading. "Does your stomach hurt?" Denise asked, completely missing the message. "Maybe you're constipated." She walked out of the room, leaving her daughter in the crushing silence of being unheard. The breaking point arrived on February 20th, 2018. Grace woke up violently ill, a fever spiking to 103 degrees, her body racked with uncontrollable chills. Harold, dismissive, suggested it was just a bug. But when Grace began convulsing, Denise knew this was something more. She rushed her to the hospital, leaving a calm Harold behind, with the words, "Call me when you know something." At the hospital, after a battery of tests, a doctor pulled Denise aside. The words she spoke were quiet, controlled, and utterly world-shattering. "Mrs. Holloway, your daughter is pregnant, approximately 14 weeks. The floor seemed to drop away. Pregnant. It was an impossibility, a violation. Denise knew instantly this was not, could not be, consensual. Her mind, reeling, began a frantic inventory of who had been alone with Grace. The list was terrifyingly short. A trusted home health aide and Harold. With trembling hands, she dialed his number, desperate to hear a reaction that would absolve him. "Harold, the doctors found something," she stammered. "Grace is pregnant." The silence on the line was an eternity. When he finally spoke, His voice was flat, devoid of the shock or horror a father should feel. "That's not possible," he said. Then came the words that triggered every alarm bell in Denise's soul. "Someone else must be involved." Not, "How could this happen?" but immediate, practiced deflection. When Denise mentioned the police would be notified, she heard it, a sharp intake of breath, the tremor of pure panic in his voice. "Denise, let's not overreact." He was trying to control the narrative. He was trying to manage the fallout. In that moment, the loving husband vanished, replaced by a man desperate to conceal a secret. The word "together," which he had used to comfort her for years, now sounded like a threat. Something was fundamentally wrong with Harold, and Denise was heading home to find out what. The drive home was a tunnel of dread. When she walked inside, Harold was on the couch, his laptop perched on his knees. He snapped it shut the moment he saw her, a movement too quick, too guilty. He tried to feign concern, but his hands betrayed him, gripping the laptop like a shield. He launched into a frantic monologue, throwing out suspects, the therapist, the delivery person, a neighbor, anyone but himself. Denise watched, her suspicion hardening into a terrifying certainty. Then he stood, announcing he needed the bathroom. He tried to take the laptop with him. At that exact moment, the screen lit up with a notification. Backup complete. 47 new files added to archive. Panic flashed across Harold's face. "Just work stuff," he blurted, clutching the device to his chest before scurrying away. He had made a fatal error. In his haste, he hadn't locked the screen. Denise sat down. She clicked the notification. It opened a hidden folder containing dozens of video files, each meticulously labeled with a date. The oldest was from November 2015. The most recent, just 6 days ago. Her hand shaking, she clicked play. She saw Grace's bedroom, the pink walls, the stuffed animals, and then she saw him. She watched for 7 seconds. That's all it took for her world to be incinerated. The man sleeping beside her, the man who had promised to help her, had been systematically violating her helpless daughter for years. The scream that tore from her throat wasn't born of fear or anger. It was the sound of a soul being ripped apart. Harold rushed into the kitchen, his face a mask of false concern. "Denise, listen to me," he began, his voice calm, rational. "Whatever you think you saw, you're misunderstanding." The audacity of the lie was breathtaking. He stood in her kitchen and told her the videos, years of recorded abuse, were medical documentation to help doctors understand Grace's episodes. He was attempting to gaslight her, to make her doubt the evidence of her own eyes. "You've been doing this for over 2 years, Denise whispered, the truth a physical weight in her throat. That's when Harold made his final mistake. His calm facade cracked, replaced by something cold and venomous. He blamed Grace, calling her confused. Then he blamed Denise, claiming she was too absent to notice. He lunged for the laptop, his voice a harsh command. "Give me that!" But Denise was faster. She snatched it first. And in that moment, the veil dropped completely. The loving stepfather was gone. In his place stood a cornered predator. Denise didn't remember making a conscious choice. Her hand moved on its own, reaching into a kitchen drawer. It closed around the cold, heavy steel of a handgun. The sound of the shot was an explosion that ripped through the silence of the suburban home. Harold stumbled back, a blossom of red spreading across his shoulder as he crumpled to the floor. "You shot me," he gasped, his eyes wide with disbelief. A dark, primal part of Denise wanted to empty the clip, to erase him from existence. But a single thought pierced through the rage. Grace. Grace was alone at the hospital. If Denise became a murderer, who would protect her daughter? Slowly, she lowered the gun. She walked to the phone and dialed 911, her voice ghost-like and calm. "I need an ambulance and the police. I shot my husband." As she waited for the sirens, Harold lay bleeding on the linoleum floor. But he was alive. He would survive. He would hire lawyers. He would lie. He would try to destroy Grace's name in a courtroom. The gun had not delivered justice. It had only delivered a warning. As the red and blue lights painted her windows, Denise knew. One bullet had not been enough. After hours of questioning, the police, already beginning to understand the situation from the laptop's contents, released Denise. She returned to a home that was no longer a home, but a haunted monument to her own blindness. The rage from the night before began to simmer again. But this time it was different. It wasn't hot and explosive. It was cold and focused. Harold was alive. The system would now take over. A slow, uncertain machine. She couldn't trust it. She had trusted before, and her daughter had paid the price. In a closet, she found Harold's travel bag. Inside was his prescription for Ambien. Holding the bottle, a new plan formed in her shattered mind. This would not be an act of impulse. This would be deliberate. This would be a mother ensuring that the man who had destroyed her child's innocence would be forced to feel a fraction of her helplessness. He would come back. Men like Harold, drowning in their own narcissism, always believe they can talk their way out of anything. And when he did, she would be ready. Against all advice, Harold Carter returned to the house the next evening. His arrogance was a suit of armor he believed was impenetrable. He saw Denise in the kitchen, a glass of orange juice on the counter, and saw not a threat, but a woman he could still manipulate. "I made you some juice," she said, her voice a placid lake over a chasm of fury. "You must be in pain." He drank it all. The bitterness of 30 milligrams of crushed Ambien was lost in the sweetness of the juice. Within 20 minutes, his speech began to slur. He stumbled, collapsing onto the couch. "What's happening?" he mumbled, his limbs refusing to obey. Denise stood over him, her expression unreadable. "I'm making sure you can't run," she said, her voice as cold and sterile as a hospital tray. As his eyes widened in a final, drug-fueled panic, she leaned in close. Grace said, "Stop." She said, "Hurt." "Did you listen?" He was paralyzed but conscious, a prisoner in his own body, just as his victim had been. When she returned from the kitchen, the blade of a knife caught the lamplight. Harold finally understood. There would be no more lies. There would only be a mother's terrible, righteous penance. The legal battle that followed was a tale of two vastly different courtrooms. For Harold Carter, there was no defense. The 240 videos he had meticulously created and stored became his digital confession. His own lawyer tried to quit the case, citing irreconcilable personal conflicts after viewing the evidence. The trial's most devastating moment came when Grace Holloway testified. Wheeled to the stand, she faced her abuser. The prosecutor asked simple, direct questions. "Grace, did Harold touch you in ways that made you uncomfortable?" With trembling fingers, she pressed a button on her tablet. A synthesized voice filled the silent courtroom. "Yes." "Did you try to tell anyone?" Her eyes found her mother's in the gallery. "Yes." "Did anyone listen?" A long pause. Then, the single word that condemned not just Harold, but an entire system of failed oversight. "No." The jury found Harold guilty on all 95 counts. He was a predator unmasked. Across the hall, Denise Holloway's fate was debated. Public outcry was immense. Petitions demanded all charges be dropped. The district attorney, facing an unprecedented moral dilemma, charged her not with attempted murder, but with a lesser count of assault, acknowledging the extreme psychological trauma she had endured. In court, Denise was unrepentant. "I'm not sorry for what I did," she told the judge, her voice unwavering. "I'm only sorry I didn't learn the truth sooner. I will never apologize for protecting my child." Judge Patricia Morrison, who would later sentence Harold to die in prison, gave Denise a sentence that balanced law with mercy. 3 years, with eligibility for parole after 18 months. One monster was caged for life. One mother was given a path back to her family. With Denise incarcerated, her sister Janet stepped in, becoming Grace's legal guardian. And then came the most difficult decision of all: what to do about the pregnancy. Doctors presented options, but the choice belonged to Grace. Through her tablet, with a resolve that stunned everyone, she made her wishes known. She wanted to keep the baby. For a young woman whose entire life had been defined by what she couldn't do, becoming a mother was something she could do. It was an act of profound defiance and reclamation. On August 17, 2018, Grace gave birth to a healthy baby girl. As the tiny infant was placed on her chest, Grace's often uncooperative arms wrapped around her daughter with surprising strength. and she smiled a smile of pure, unadulterated joy. When asked the baby's name, Grace carefully spelled it out on her tablet. Hope. Denise Holloway served 18 months. Prison was not a punishment, but a strange kind of sanctuary. The first time in 2 decades, she wasn't responsible for anyone but herself. Through therapy, she confronted the crushing guilt of what she had missed. On May 12, 2020, she walked out of the Ohio Reformatory for Women. Waiting for her was her sister, her daughter, and a 21-month-old granddaughter she had only known through supervised visits. Hope, too young to understand the gravity of the moment, but old enough to sense its love, reached for her with chubby hands. "Gamma," she said. "Gamma home." In that moment, in a prison parking lot, a fractured family began to piece itself back together. Today, 3 generations of women live lives defined not by a monster's actions, but by their own resilience. Harold Carter remains in protective custody, a forgotten man in a concrete box, his name a footnote in a story that is no longer about him. This story is about Grace, who survived the unthinkable and found the joy of motherhood. It's about Janet, who answered the call of family without hesitation. It's about Hope, a child born from darkness who became a beacon of light. And it's about Denise, a mother who was pushed into hell and walked back out, not for herself, but for them. Grace, whose voice grows stronger every day, has a phrase she often uses to describe her mother, a phrase that perfectly encapsulates this harrowing journey. Mom, strong love. It is a testament that even after the most profound betrayals and the deepest darkness, some things cannot be broken. Thank you for joining us at Fatal Affairs. If this story resonated with you, please like, share, and subscribe. Until next time, stay vigilant and listen closely to those who need you most.